Todd Aldinger is on Zoom. He couldn't make it today because he's not feeling that great. You want to introduce yourself? They can hear you.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm sorry. I was really hoping to be there, and my stomach was not cooperating today. A couple of years ago, when he got sick, between holidays, it was a normal occurrence, but now apparently it's something we need to shut down the entire country for. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I wanted to at least come on this call and talk to you and answer any questions you have. I'm an attorney. I've sued Cuomo 4 times actually. I beat him 3 of the 4 times. And then I sued Hochul on both the nurse vaccine mandate and on the in-school mask mandate. And I lost both those cases after, the judges that were deciding them decided that, during a pandemic, they are going to give complete deference to the executive branch of New York to do whatever they want.
I'm vaccinated, all of you. Yes, I know you're vaccinated. You're the smart ones, but there's people out there who aren't listening to God.
And it wasn't just me. There was about 4 or 5 similar lawsuits, and different judges throughout the state all came down uniformly on that issue. And so it doesn't seem like there's any way to fight this in the courts anymore. The judiciary is lockstep in line with Kathy Hochul. The legislature, it's 2/3 majority, both Democrats, and none of those legislatures have been willing to stand up to her either. And so, I think that a lot of the part of this moves from the legal sphere and now into the sphere of civil disobedience and collective action. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. We don't have any checks and balances that are left. Our courts are not standing up. Our legislators are not standing up. And Kathy Hochul is just doing whatever she wants. And nothing she's doing makes any sense. There's no scientific basis for it. There is no legal basis for it either. But there really is just no checks and balances to stop that. So we really have to organize really at the grassroots level and figure out ways to avoid these mandates and to fight back in ways we normally wouldn't have to when there were working checks and balances in our government.
So you're running for New York State Congress, correct?
I am. I'm going to be running, but once they finish drawing the districts, I don't even know what the district looks like yet. I don't know if what counties are going to be in it, and I don't know what this number is going to be yet. Okay. They're sitting there and drawing the districts, and it's going to be gerrymandered pretty bad. But the good thing is there's going to have to be one really strong Republican district in Western New York. And whatever that district ends up being, whatever the boundaries ends up being, whatever the number ends up being, that's the one I will be running for.
Okay. Just so that we're aware when that's going to come in so we can keep our eyes open for that. And then if it does get upheld, I don't want to say the what ifs, but are people going to have options? We got to prepare ourselves.
Yeah, that one, that's the one I'm most hopeful on, is that the Supreme Court's going to knock that one out, knock out the similar one for the federal contractors. It doesn't seem like there's any statutory basis for this. And in state and federal law, there is a much clearer doctrine of when a legislature can delegate authority. And in the federal courts, the federal courts won't allow the executive to do something that's a big deal, for lack of a better word, like something that's important, socially important, politically important, economically important, unless the statute the president relies on speaks clearly to that specific topic. And there is not a single statute in all of the United States laws that talk about mandatory vaccination. So there really is nothing for the Biden administration to, hang their hat on when they defend this. They're just going to go through the same argument that, Kathy Hochul's been making, is that it's a pandemic. We should be able to do whatever we want. And while the New York courts are, very liberal and they are very loyal to Hochul because these judges only have 6-year terms, and so if she serves another term as governor, she gets to appoint 2/3 of them. So they don't want to, go against her because they feel like they won't get reappointed. Fortunately, in the federal courts, our founders' wisdom they gave the judges lifetime tenure. So I don't think that that's really going to be an issue. And I think that we have, 6 judges on the Supreme Court now that, even Roberts is not going to be very amenable to an idea that without any legislative statute that speaks to vaccination whatsoever, that we're going to let the Biden administration just create vaccination law, out of thin air. So I think that lawsuit's going to be successful. I think that mandate's going to be defeated. But if it isn't, that's going to be a real problem for a lot of Americans. Anyone who works at a company with more than 100 people, you really won't have any options left for that but to quit.
I think it's pretty sad that our justice system isn't judging according to the law instead of according to politics.
Yes.
It's disgusting.
It is.
Very disgusting.
Yeah, I think that's true. When I was litigating my first round of cases against Cuomo, the good thing I had going for me is that Cuomo was just embroiled in his, sexual harassment scandal at that time. So the courts felt that he was going down, he wasn't going to be reelected, and they could distance themselves from him. Now, you have all these judges thinking that Kathy Hochul is going to be reelected. Do I want to get on her bad side? And that's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah. Just one more question for you, because you were the one fighting the mask mandates all through Erie County from district to district. Now, did you do any digging into the CDC Funding Agreement? I just want to make my crowd aware here. I don't know if they've seen my lives or seen me talk about it, but every school basically who took that CDC Funding Agreement money is being run by the CDC's regulations, and our children are not going to be out of masks until June 30th of 2023 minimum. Is there any way that, I don't know, like I said, have you done any digging or anything to maybe trump that, or have any legal standing to fight against it? It really boils down to money, and these schools are not going to return that funding, and they're not going to want to forfeit losing it. So basically, the school districts have all sold our children out, so there's really, I don't know where us parents can even fight that anymore.
Yeah, well, if you go down, in Florida, they took some of the CDC money too, right?
Okay.
I enforced that provision. I think that they know that if there's actually a lawsuit brought on that provision, they would lose. There's a doctrine called commandeering. You can't commandeer a state, municipality, or a state official by giving them money. And what that means is you can't say, here's $100 that we're going to give to Erie County, and then they have to do whatever we say. The money has to be directly related to what they're telling you to do. Okay. It can't be, just here's a check you can spend on everything, and by the way, you have to do this other thing on the side. There's a whole doctrine of anti-commandeering related to that, and I would bring that up in a lawsuit, but the first thing we got to do is we got to get rid of the Governor Hochul's directives and Governor Hochul's executive orders, because I can't even get to that layer of the argument until I get rid of the state mandate.
Yeah.
And the courts do not seem willing to get rid of the mandate.
No, they're not.
Yeah, so I have looked at that. I don't think it's insurmountable. I think it's actually something that can be pretty easily handled. The real problem is that we need to, even to get that level of analysis, we first have to knock out the state directives, which, apparently they can require anyone to wear a mask anytime, anyone to get vaccinated anytime, and the legislature doesn't have to do their job during a pandemic. Yeah. That Kathy Hochul can run the entire shop.
Well, I get this is so much bigger than the schools. I understand that. Like you said, it's coming from Hochul, the state level mandates and everything. But the reality of the situation is, we really, what can we do to try to get through the layers? Because they're coming for our kids, and part of the terms and conditions of that money is masks and vaccines, and they are to spend the money a certain way. But when I challenged my school board and asked them, not only in writing but personally at a board meeting, what they're spending it on, that should be public knowledge. And every person that I've talked to that has challenged their school board, they're absolutely refusing to show proof of what they're spending the money on. And The other term and condition of that too was to make it public knowledge that they were taking the money and signing the agreement, and no district behind knowing did that.
Yeah, they were supposed to do a public hearing as well, right? And so this is the other problem with, they were supposed to do a public hearing and get community feedback before they took the money.
And they didn't.
What happened is the state took the money on behalf of all the school districts and this was kind of like a game for them to avoid the public hearing. But in counterpoint to that is if they're going to play this game to avoid the public hearing, I don't know that you can make it a binding contract if you're not following the requirements of the contract as set forth by Congress. So, I'm aware of this issue. I just think there's so many problems with how they did it that I think it can be defeated a lot easier than some of the other things I've been at. But again, it just gets to getting to that level of analysis, right? Because first you got to get rid of the state requirements. Then you got to go to the school board level, and the school board has to be willing to, have a no mask, no vaccine policy. And then if the CDC tries to enforce the contract against the school district, then you can fight against the contract. So that's really 3 steps down from where we are right now.
Yeah.
And, I really would hope that eventually the legislature gets its act together and realizes these masks aren't working. They're doing nothing besides, slowing down language acquisition skills amongst the children. I mean, that's the only thing the masks are accomplishing. It's making our children dumber, right? I mean, it's making them it's harder for them to learn English.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about trying to learn a second language. As an adult, it's hard to remember what it was like to learn English. But it's that you can think about trying to learn a second language. And if you were wearing a mask while someone's speaking to you in Spanish, you're unable to pick up what their mouth's doing. A lot of that communication when you're learning a language in the early stages, it's not just auditory. It's visual of lip reading and auditory combined. And we are, removing that important part of language learning from, our children's lives.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so, that's all the masks are accomplishing. And eventually I would just hope that someone in some position of authority in state government would start bringing this to a head. And if the courts aren't going to do it, then, maybe I'm naive to hope that the legislature would do it. But at some point they have to start realizing that their constituents are outraged by this.
Yeah.
And it's not just us, lily white people living up in, suburban or in rural upstate New York. I mean, the least vaccinated population and the population that's probably most opposed to wearing the mask when they go outside in New York City is minorities living in Bronx and Brooklyn, right? I mean, they have legislators too, and I'm sure they're hearing from them, and they just don't want to make this tough decision, so they just keep kicking everything up to Kathy Hochul, where when she does something they agree with, they can take credit for, and when she says something they disagree with, be like, oh no, well that's the governor just using her power, can't do anything about it. And that's really the problem we're in right now, is the legislature is hiding behind the governor all throughout the state and letting her do everything, and you never criticizing her because they don't actually want to take the votes on this, because especially in some of those downstate liberal districts, they don't even know which way to vote to win a primary, because they have so many parents that are outraged, and then they have so many of these, these people that are in the cult of Dr. Fauci that, think that if we didn't have masks, that we'd all be dead already. So, there's a lot of issues at play here. It's not just Democrat, Republican. It's not, just upstate versus downstate. And, I'm hoping that we keep the pressure on, and eventually it breaks through into the news cycle about how useless masks are and how useless they've been this entire time, that somebody somewhere in New York State with, some elected authority and that actually, has a vote on things, does something. And until it happens, we just got to keep grinding out until, we get attention.
Well, that just makes me grateful to be in Cattaraugus County a little bit more, because our legislators are amazing, and they did try really hard. They actually made a petition to get rid of the mask mandates here in Cat County, but that judge as well shut it down. But they haven't stopped fighting, and they're still trying. So
no, there are some really bright spots in the state, and there's some really dark spots where people that could have stood up aren't standing up. But then there are some really bright spots of people just. County legislators, a couple state legislators, David DiPietro amongst them, just taking a stand and just, not caring about whether they're angering Governor Hochul, not caring about whether, a project's not going to be funded in their district because, they took a stand against her.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much, Todd, for your time. Thank you so much for calling in.
I couldn't be there. I felt awful today, but
No, it's okay. We all understand.
I'm glad I could do this.
And I'm glad you informed us on everything you were able to today. So thank you again so much, Todd.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.